and that's presented in the subsequent year budget. So, I take care of all my expenses, the person who comes in, I have an extra $100. Instead of the $100 to next year, the sheriff proposes a $100 project to spend that money. It's in the public interest, it meets all the highest criteria, then we spend it. And guess where we put that money? Not in the county coffers, we put it in escrow. And you even create conditions whereby it can only come out of escrow if there's a bona fide approved project that's been signed off by the county sheriff and the county commissioners in that subsequent year. That's wise, I think. And you can have all kinds of fun lobbying for your favorite projects. Okay, so the next major point is you can't do it all at once, but you have 8% of your revenue coming from interfund transfers. You have to have a schedule developed to move away from that interfund transfer money. You're not going to do it all at once, but you may be able to cut it down. In other words, maximum interfund transfers in the next fiscal year is 5%. Next year it's going to be 3%. The year after that is going to be nothing because we don't want to have interfund transfers funding these essential parts of our government. Where does that money go? Well, that money stays in the fund balance of the county, which can then be allocated and appropriated as needed and as desired by the citizens. Or it could be kept there as a rainy day fund, just like the state has its rainy day fund. But what I'm saying is develop a schedule to wean yourself off of that transfer, interfund transfer. Okay, next point. There's only two more. You remember when I talked about the fee-for-service monies coming into the jail, and then there was money left over for the sheriff to spend in his budget? That surplus fee revenue's got to be, it's got to be replaced. Now, I think it's going to take care of itself if you don't have the income, but additional fee-for-service monies should be replaced by other sustainable sources of revenue. Finally, and this came up earlier, but for the 1920 fiscal year, scrutinize program requirements and expenditure estimates, including identification of expenditure risks and development of risk mitigation plans, to seek opportunities to reduce revenue budget demand. This action, not only do you want to do it to prepare for the next budget, is identify the risks and you need for money and have a mitigation plan to address those risks so that you have accuracy. But that you have to build into the budget starting now and forevermore. It's the best way to do business. So that's a brief and I hope entertaining overview of the budget. I still have to do the expenditure analysis, but what I can tell you is that in the sheriff's office, most of the expenditures are for personnel. What you decide to do at the jail has a lot to do with that. And the rest of, the majority share of those expenditures are for personnel. The rest of it is for equipment and cars and things like that. I think you can talk to anybody in the sheriff's department and they'll tell you how good their equipment is and how up to date it is. And you'll discover that they're not driving around in Cadillac SUVs. A lot of their equipment's worn. Sometimes it is replaced and it does look new, and that's great. But it takes a lot to equip a sheriff's office. And so when I look at those expenditure budgets, what I'm saying is that's not as big a problem. You could cut half of your non-personnel expenditures in all of your budgets, and you wouldn't even have enough to make up for the interfund transfer. That kind of shows you what you got. So you'll be able to make incremental changes in expenditure budgets, but they'll be incremental, they'll be small. The biggest changes are that you need changes in revenues and perhaps even changes in the mission of public safety operation for this county with an eye toward the future. What kind of mission are you going to have in the future? So ladies and gentlemen, I hope that helps, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Bill, if I can make a comment, and you alluded to it a little bit, but you didn't kind of go down the rabbit hole I was kind of hoping you were going to go down, is in that aspect of the detention center, Bill said that as taxpayers, you guys are paying for our local inmates. That is, and sorry, that's false. There is no tax dollars levied to operate the jail. Everything that that jail does comes off the backs of the staff housing out-of-county state prisoners.
That's correct.
So the expectation of that jail right now, as we sit today, the expected revenue to take care of that and fund it is $839,000. So when we're talking about half of that money walking out the door in March, when Lewis and Clark opens, is a huge amount of money. When that happens, and so when we have a discussion about whether or not we keep a jail open or if we take them somewhere else, last year, just in housing costs, for the people that we were required to arrest and detain, we would have spent $305,000 in Lewis in Gallatin County housing inmates there that we don't have tax dollars to pay for. Okay, that's not medical, that's not transportation, that is strictly daily housing costs. So when we look at the cost of what the jail needs to operate on, is it $400,000, is it $450,000, or are we going to house them somewhere else? The problem is we have no money to lean either way. Part of that jail revenue, as Bill alluded to, that 5%, also covers part of your patrol division. So you lose $150,000 in jail revenue because we can't house them, that's a reduction in your patrol division. When we talk about a reduction in patrol division, then we start having issues about the cause and effect of what happens with our obligations set forth to take care of the city of Townsend in a local agreement. If we can't meet that objective, does that then change the amount of money that's going to come in from the city for the services that they have to have? Now, under Montana statute, the city of Townsend is required to have a police department. If they cannot afford to hire one, they have to have a contract with another law enforcement agency for that. That's where that interlocal agreement comes in, if people didn't understand. So there's a cause and effect of this with this jail and the past practices of the climate we used to live in and where we're at today. The other thing that wasn't brought up is in the 2017 legislative session, legislation decided to cause or start justice reform or justice reinvestment. So we started to not incarcerate people, we started kicking people out of prison, we started kicking people out of probation and parole, and we started giving 3-year deferred sentences over anything else. And so that does not include people coming to jail when they're convicted of a felony crime. What they're getting is probation and out the door. You will serve more time in the state of Montana for a second offense DUI than you will on a felony conviction as we sit today. So that's part of the problem when we talk about the culture of what's changing with incarcerating inmates and making that a funding mechanism for your public safety. So when I've had conversations with some of you folks sitting in the room, when I say that in March of 2020, what's going to happen and what you expect from your public safety and what you want it to be, I need to know, and the people sitting at the table need to know, because that's how we're going to base what we're going to operate on. Does that make sense? Okay.
Could you put some dollar values across the board on the top 5? How much is in your budget right now from prisoner board, property taxes, state entitlement?
So right now, our expected revenue for jail, for inmate housing is $839,000. What we get in actual tax dollars is $599,000. What we get in, is it 836?
837, 836, yeah.
State and town money is about 127,000. And interfund transfer, I'm not really sure what it is. And I think
146,000.
Was it?
146,000.
146,000, and the state contract, or the city contract is
15.
220.
220.
So that's where we're at. I mean, so we're banking on money that we can't guarantee, and that's not how we wanna do
So
it.
is it fair to say when Lewis and Clark opens up, they withdraw their prisoners from here, which we know will happen,
Mhm.
that it's really closer to 800,000 that you're going to lose?
No,
No, because right now, we're housing, when Bill says that the staff over there at the detention center does a great job, they really do. We are holding right now for Carbon County, Park County, we've held for Sheridan County, we've held for
Flathead County.
Flathead County, Cascade County, Missoula County, Butte, Silver Bow, Beaverhead, Madison. We have gone above and beyond trying to make it a remarkable thing, to try to keep the doors open so we make it a safe place to live. And that's the thing that, and we all know, it's been one of my arguments, is what is your safety worth to you? And I guess that when you guys leave, what is it worth? What is it worth to be able to go home and sleep with your windows open and your doors unlocked? What's it worth to be able to walk across the street and not get run over by some knucklehead who's driving like a jackwagon? What are these things worth? And so that's, but it comes down to, I work for you folks. This isn't about me being a dictator and this is how it's gonna be. It's what is it that you guys want? And I think that's what Bill's really been working with us on, and the commissioners as well. Is what is it, the service that you guys want, and what's it gonna cost, and what's it worth? So, does that help?
yeah, it does. And all I'm saying is that if you have to have 36 prisoners to kind of be whole financially in the jail, and you're not gonna have 36, and you still wanna pay for the facility, what is your revenue stream gonna be and how dependable is that revenue stream? That's all I'm saying. If it's possible to adjust for the market temporarily and hold that facility open until you pass through the storm of the market change, that's, you know, that could be a strategy. And so what that means is that if you're, in my report, I'm talking about a $400,000 event. So let's say you go from 836 and you lose 400,000 plus the subsidy to the rest of the fund, which is another 105 or something like that. Do you have $500,000 elsewhere that can prop up that facility until fee-for-service revenue comes in? That's strategic.
Yes, Dave?
Bill, you talk, property taxes are confusing. And most of what they have to deal with is dictated from the top down, from the state. Could you explain the property tax system a little bit, what floating mills are, what a mill cap is, and then the process that new construction, how it actually lands on the tax rolls that they're able to take advantage of, and the timeframes involved in that?
I can speak generally to it. I'm not an expert on Montana taxes, even though I work for the agency that does the assessments. But you have, this county is interesting. It has a certain amount of taxable value, 140 million, something like that. 140 some $million of taxable value. That if you could assess a mill levy on each one of those millions of dollars, you have more money than you could shake a stick at. But there's a restriction to what the total amount of property can actually be taxed on that assessment. And it's something like 14 million or 18 million, something like that. So it's a fraction of what the total value of the county is. And so then you have a restriction on how many thousands of that value you can actually tax. That's a mill. You have a restriction on that number. And then you basically end up with a derived amount of property tax dollars being shared by every taxing jurisdiction. Cities, counties, fire districts, you know, they're all sharing some portion of this reduced amount of total value. So that's one issue. And every year, property is assessed. Not each property is assessed, but every year property is assessed and the value generally goes up. And the total assessed value of the county goes up as new property comes on board. But when somebody builds on a property, there's a period of time before taxes are assessed on that property, and then a period of time before those assessed property taxes actually make it to the county. So it could be that you have a sensational amount of new development, but you won't see it on the tax rolls or assessed value and taxes charged to it maybe 2 years after it comes on board. And so, again, that's strategic. You know, when is this gonna hit? What can we predict is going to be the property value, and how does that bump up against the absolute caps that you have for each kind of property? And how many dollars can you get in? That's, it's not quite rocket science, but we have to try to make rocket scientists of ourselves in order to understand it and be able to predict it and to work strategically with it.
And the other part of
Does
that
that help?
formula, the other part of that formula is during that time period before the revenue shows up, we have a large demand on our services that we are required to provide.
That's correct. People expect services when they come in, from the day that they show up in the county. They want to be able to call the police department and the sheriff's office and get a response, or any other service that they get. I was looking the other day, there was a local option bill that the city of Livingston was promoting for people who go through that county to National Park. I read that bill carefully, because I was thinking, I wonder if all these people are driving through Broadwater County, would you guys qualify? Because I gotta be going someplace, and maybe they're going to National Park. And I was looking at the definitions to see if there was any wiggle room at all for you, and of course, the local option tax bills are not surviving the process, but,
Mike,
Yes, yeah.
by the way, our road traffic almost doubles, if not 2.5 times during the summer, the peak of the summer,
Yes.
and I call them terrorists, when the tourists show up. So that is a strain on our resources as well. You made your commercial commentation on opening the southern end of the county and the midsection and the north end for development. With development, we also have additional strain on our resources. Do you have a formula of, if you've got, not you, but is there a formula of, let's say you bring in 100 houses, it's gonna cost this much in additional output in needs? Is there any kind of percentage there, or?
there isn't a direct percentage, but what you do want, what you want to do as a governing unit is, you want to have a system so that services you supply into a development area, like a road, like, you know, just whatever, like plowing or whatever you provide, that those costs are actually paid for by that development. We call them system development charges. And I've actually built system development charge mechanisms for paying for infrastructure primarily. But when, you know, for the Public Works Department, you know, you have a Public Works budget, you're putting a road in, the development should pay for that road and should be apportioned to them appropriately. And there's a calculation you can make to get that done. The point I wanted to make is that when you, and I talked about this generally when I was talking about the strategy of economic development, is when you do economic development, you want, people are desiring something from you. They're desiring to move into your place. And they're desiring that place and whatever services can come with that place. At that point, the high level desire, that's when you want to make sure that whatever you can charge them for that to happen, you're doing it. Whether it be the solid waste charges or any other fees and charges that you have the authority to invent. As long as they're equitable, you can get away with them. Now, what I, you know, And I saw in the newspaper when I stopped, I saw a newspaper stand, and it's this article about solid waste, your other favorite topic. When you, a solid waste system should be a fee-for-service system. So I would look at that budget, and if I saw a property tax dollar in there, I'd say get it out, use it for something else. Because all the fees for providing that service should be, all the costs of providing that service should be paid. Now, what we do in the water and wastewater utility business is we say, okay, if somebody's low income, we have to have a means test for them to have a discount. You can have a discounted fee system. In other words, you know, I make twice as much as you, and it's a burden for you to pay your solid waste bill. We set up the fee system so there's a pot of money that could be extended back to you as a rebate based on your income or the situation, you know, age, whatever. Communities have freedom to do those kind of things as long as they're not using federal grant dollars to fund that facility. That's the kind of imagination you have to bring to the entire county operation, is where fee for service works, do it. Where property tax dollars works, do that instead. In the case of the jail facility, fee for service has worked for a long time. It's just not gonna work for a period of time in the future. Does that help?
It does.
But when it comes to economic development, I mean, you really have to think that out.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about a development zone, southern end of the county, where you're not able to collect property taxes for a period of time in order for that development to occur. Sometimes you have to rethink that. Would those people come there anyway if you didn't provide that incentive, or less of an incentive, or whatever? I don't know.
I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. We've all witnessed where, like the Gallatin County, or Flathead, or the Bitterroot, or Missoula, or whatever, when they have their economic booms, it ruins the lifestyle of that area. And I think all of us have that concern here, that if we open the floodgates to development, and the taxes go up because of increased property taxes, which they always do, people have to leave. They have to sell their property because they can't afford the taxes. So there's a, like you said, I think, a double-edged sword there. If we open the doors, are we ready for the change? And, yeah, we're gonna get some money, but we're gonna lose the quality of life that we've moved here and stayed here for. And,
Right, and so what I would suggest, and I think the commissioners know this, is that your elected representatives develop criteria for making decisions based on the desires of the community. That's why I love the idea of having listening sessions
I really appreciated you saying that.
throughout the county, so you can say, okay, we've got this challenge, well, we live here, this is our government, believe it or not. We don't hate everybody. So, you know, let's work it out. We live here, we want a quality life, these are our criteria for development or whatever it is, and you express that to the commissioners, and hopefully they follow that lead. So I think you should do it at any rate, just so you have more transparency at least on what this challenge is. Yes, sir.
I was
Am I allowed
curious,
to take questions from them?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was curious of what, if it was normal for prisons that are open right now in Montana to be operating within smaller towns for free. It's kind of an issue that has been brought up of that right now, that the county doesn't technically pay Townsend to operate this facility at all. In fact, Townsend quite oppositely pays the county for its interlocal agreement on top of it. So the infrastructure costs that come from this prison, where are they, who are they being absorbed by the county or by the city?
Are you talking about this facility here?
Correct, and other facilities, how are they dealing with this issue?
Well, the counties have their facility costs that they meet with their own budgets. The only time that they're supported from external sources is when that external government needs to put one of its prisoners in your jail because they don't have the space, and they actually pay those costs. So when we're talking about a reduction, and I hope I won't answer your question, but when we're talking about a reduction in prisoners, we're also talking about a reduction in the per diem cost of meeting those prisoners' needs. You know, you're not paying for meals, you're not paying for so you know, some of your costs go down even when you don't have the prisoners in there. There are fixed costs like salaries and electricity and all that stuff you still have to pay for.
I'm sorry, that's not quite what I was looking.
But going back to your question, I think, I'm not aware of the state or any other jurisdiction imposing a mandate on your community for paying for facilities.
Well, it seems like the city of Townsend and other cities that would have a facility such as a busy facility inside of it would be naturally subsidizing that facility if they were not compensated for the infrastructure degradation that's on that goes with that facility. The facility doesn't operate for free, such as the incident that we had where the sewage and the sewage became a problem. I don't know, just prisoners flushing stuff, and I think they had to get a grinder, and you know, there's always problems with the infrastructure. But then that ultimately comes back down to the city of Townsend to absorb in some such way, because there's really no compensation for the county government to the city. And this is kind of a newer problem because we normally didn't have, you know, the county seat so large and responsible for so many people and then operating inside this little teeny town. And now we see more people outside the county than we do, you know, inside of this area that it's operating.
There are two things happening, and I'll let the mayor address this in a second. Let's talk about infrastructure. This gentleman brought it up. In the summertime, everybody's on this road. And guess what? They stop at the Quick Mart and they go to the bathroom. They flush the toilet. That goes into the mayor's facility. But that isn't free. That customer's waste is being paid for by that mini mart.
Right.
And that mini mart's fee should be designed in order to take care of its costs, right? Now, somebody who's housed in the jail, somebody from, let's say, lives in Clark County, sends a prisoner, and the prisoner's in a cell and he's just flushing all day long, right? Okay, the county is paying for that citizen, the county pays the bill, just like anybody else does, for the wastewater. Just like they pay the electric bill, they pay a wastewater bill, or a water bill for the use of the facility by the prisoner. I would imagine that Seth probably goes and knocks him on the head a little bit and says, hey, keep doing that. But it isn't free, the cost is still paid.
How about roads, like the use of the roads and going in and out?
Roads are different in that, and that's why a lot of communities like local option tax, because you have a visitor coming in from Canada, decide to take the shortcut to Bozeman. They're coming through on the highway, then they drive a portion of the city streets, maybe they're running around town, they're wearing out your road. Are they paying anything? No, they're not paying anything. What you're hoping is that they have a gas guzzler and they pay enough gas tax to, some of that money eventually will get back to Townsend and you'll get reimbursement that way. It's really hard, and this happens a lot. You have, I used to live in Boise, and we had this unincorporated area around the city. Everybody worked in Boise, so they would use the street lights, they'd use the streets, they'd use everything, and then they'd go home. And they were happy because they weren't paying city taxes. So there was a subsidy. What is the benefit to the city on that? Well, you hope that there's enough economic activity coming from that visitor that some of those dollars will eventually make their way back into the city coffers. But it is a subsidy.
But what about in the case of government workers, where you have a government-strong city, and pretty much everybody's just government, and they're just running around in their government, and therefore they're working for free under that umbrella, because they're not part of the general economic, you know, scenario. So they're over here using the roads, going to work every day. You know, the road raiders are coming and going outside right inside of Townsend and leaving, and you know, yet the county contributes zero to the city of Townsend for its infrastructure. How is that possible?
Maybe I don't think it's entirely the case, I don't think it's all or none, but maybe the mayor, you can address part of it.
The one thing when we had the plastics in the sewer system, the county bought that grinder and they installed that grinder. They paid for that themselves. The county's bill on the sewer rate that we just had, I believe it was in the neighborhood of going upwards around $17,000 a year, I believe. So they do pay that. And as far as driving around the streets, we don't charge anybody to drive on our streets. And I've never seen it in the state of Montana. If you're driving through Lewistown, there's no bing bong where they stop you and you throw a dime in there or whatever it is. You know.
The toll road on this highway would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be.
I don't know, I hope that helps.
Steve,
It isn't entirely free though.
Steve,
Question for
I
Whit.
mean,
The
little bit.
county doesn't pay for their own prisoners?
No,
If the county used the same rate that you're being paid from out-of-county prisoners, how much money would that generate for your office?
In other words,
not tracking it.
How many county, Broward County prisoners, if they were paying, how much would it generate?
Gosh, you'd have to maybe ask Brandon or Seth.
He's doing it.
He's got- Brandon's our numbers guru, so. We're gonna take his gun away and give him his stuff.
Are you texting or are you figuring?
I'm trying to figure out.
While we're working up that number, I guess the discussion is, since the jail's been built, we used to pay for that personally, the county did. And hence the jail went in and it became quite a profitable undertaking for the sheriff's department. Basically, the sheriff's department used to be a terrible drain on the county. When the jail went in, it was no longer that drain on the county. They were generating enough money to almost be self-supporting. Sounds like that's getting ready to go away. County government might have to step up and start paying for their own prisoners again.
And I
Well,
think
we-
it's worth,
I think that we realize that, but our question is, where are we supposed to get that money? Because right now, that, you know, the money that the jail generating right now pays for the detention center, and it also pays a good portion of public safety. So when that goes away, where are we supposed to come up with that money? Because the bottom line is, when Bill gets done, if Bill or whoever we have come in and look at all the rest of our departments, I guarantee you, when we get done, that every department that we have in this county government is in the exact same situation. We are underfunded and we are understaffed because of the sheriff's department has a huge increase in calls. Our treasurer's office is slammed. Our accounting people are, the pile of claims, if you let them pile up for a week, is this tall. Every department that we have is understaffed, underfunded. And I guarantee you, when we get done with that study, you will find that out.
I'd like to see that study, but that is pretty normal. I mean, virtually all departments are understaffed and overworked and want more people, and that's you guys' job to keep cap on that. But in the meantime, you've got a 2020 trigger it's gonna hit. It's gonna be $425,000. Can you come up with $212,000 out of PILT and then go to a bond issue locally and sell that till the Wilson County stabilizes?
And I would think that that's what we're gonna have to try to do, but the flip side of that is Washington DC gonna give us PIL? Because we never, and another thing is this entitlement share. If the state legislature seems to think that state county governments don't need any money, but we need to fund a public defender's office that's quadruples its budget, so they need to take our state entitlement share and put that into another state department, when the county, we have no way to generate any other income. So they're taking our money away, and then it's the same thing with PIL. If we don't get PIL, you know, we've got programs that we fund specifically out of PIL. Our health insurance is funded by PIL. If they come in and we don't get PIL, there goes our health insurance. And that's the problem, you know, like Bill was saying, inter-fund transfers, is PILT qualified as an inter-fund
Yes, it
transfer?
does. It does.
So that's
So-
not a stable source that we can transfer. We don't have a stable source to transfer unless we start cutting programs, and then it's the same thing. We're gonna cut this program, you're gonna get 500 people say, well, you can't cut that program, my kid relies on that program. And then the next person comes in, and the next program and say, we need to cut this, you can't do that. So, you know, that's the decision we're stuck with.
Well,
That's-
back then, the only thing that's stable is if you put a permanent bond issue like we've done on the school. We've got $1 million bond issue annually on the school. You're gonna end up asking the taxpayer for a $450,000 bond issue.
And so what I see, and that's why I think we need to listen, because when people understand what the issue is and they have something to say about it, then they get the guidance. I can tell you that the legislature decided to cut the Department of Revenue. Not this session, which they're going to do again, but they did last session. The way we responded to that, two things we did. One is we closed a lot of county offices. And the second thing is, the unit that I run in the department, we look at every possible way to gain efficiency through use of technology, changing our work processes. We basically look at everything and say, if that's the way we've always done it, let's see if that can change, because we may need to do that. Mike's right, when, you know, there's a constituency for every budget. There's a constituency for every program within each fund. And it's a very difficult thing to figure out who's winning and who's losing. But when you evaluate those programs against the resources you have, and then you look at what your long-range funding strategy might be, then maybe you're being smarter than somebody who doesn't even try. That's where I think you have to go. You just have to work those things out.
Can I make a comment real quick, just kind of follow up with what you're saying in regards to a bond issue or something of that nature? One of the things that we haven't really discussed is the last budget cycle, the way the county dollars were and the lack of substantial increase within the mill value, because I think it went up like $100, I think was the extent of it. Not what we were expecting. So one of the things we're trying to get a grip on, and I'm using Bill, Brandon, and Seth, and myself, is the fact is when we looked at our budget numbers and we said, okay, this is where we're at, and Brandon being the number guy, he typed it all in, and we were 300,000 off. And so that's why we had to cut those 3 vacant positions. That's why we had to cut 30% of our operations. Everything non-personnel wise all got cut by 30% to balance the budget out. So when we start talking about the issue of we know in March of 20, we're gonna lose anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 in expected jail revenue from a source that we've had for several years. The problem is, if we went and asked for a mill value or a mill levy, not only do we have to make up the $400,000 to $500,000 that we're gonna lose out of the jail, but the same breath is we are way under where we were 2 years ago in staff and ability to operate. So then we have to take back that $300,000 that we had to circumvent to make a balanced budget. So this is where the problem really arises, where, and I'm sure Ms. Moore is gonna allude to it as well, is we have over 700 homes in the south end of that county, and there's no public service down there whatsoever. So not only do we have to fix the issues that we're looking at right now, what we're expecting in 20, but how do we then find the funding and revenue to support the expectation of the services of the 3,000 people that live in the south end of the county alone? And how we're gonna put resources down there in place. And 2 deputies, 2 patrol cars, you're looking to upfit those 2 things with wages and benefits at the current level, which is about $5. We start our deputies about $5 outside of what the median is, or the market wage value of a starting deputy sheriff. We're about $5 less. How are you gonna get to there when you know you're looking at a $250 bill, $250,000 bill just to get it started? That's not an office, that's not equipment, that's just 2 cars, 2 people, and outfit. So if you look at the grand spectrum of how are we gonna fix this is why I encourage people to be here, because this is where we all look at the world through different glasses. So how are we gonna make up $1 million difference from where we're at today? Because in a year and a half a year to a year and a half, we are in a serious problem. And that's what we're working towards, and I'm hoping Bill's not gonna run from us now, that he's got his report done, and he'll still continue to help us mitigate the rough waters here and find a solution, so.
Mike?
Well, a lot of dancing around the numbers here. What do you think that you would need for a mill levy to do that $1 million?
Mill brings in 16,000. We're talking about quite a few.
A lot of mills.
Dave?
Now, for the commission, I believe you stated you're going to continue and do a countywide evaluation. Okay, in that evaluation, I would hope that you would ask that the history of the mills be looked at for, going back 5-7 years. Look at those mills and how they're capped. When they have a new valuation, you're capped at what that you can levy in the way of in terms of dollars, not in terms of mills. So that doesn't always come up very much at all. And then how are those mills distributed for all the services? The public safety fund is one of them, and it gets so many mills, but all of those, so that there's a complete understanding of, in layman's terms, of how our property tax dollars are being spent in each area that it goes to, as well as identifying some deficiencies, and concentrate on the revenue side, not so much on the expense side, because we have elected officials who know what their job is, they're looking for the revenue, and then they decide how to accomplish the things they're tasked with doing. Expense side has a limited amount of usefulness, especially after I've seen county budgets be cut here in the last 3 or 4 years. Every year we've seen cuts. So I would ask that you really move forward with that and put have a list of questions for him to answer in that process.
In the report, I do talk about an alternative strategy for funding departments, where, and this is, it's up for your discussion, it's the idea that when you look at a particular operation in the county, it has to have some kind of base funding. Do you want to then say, we're going to attribute this many mills to that function? Then as the value of the county grows, they can expect additional revenues for that particular function. You've made the decision ahead of time what the comparative value is of that operation. And then you fix the property tax amount, and then you work toward raising the tide that lifts all boats.
But, and as a follow-up, and
that's an alternative.
If you look at the history of the mills, they fluctuate. Public safety mills have gone from a high of to a low of, and there's always reasons for that to happen. And if there's a voted levy, I mean, if the decision is to go out and ask the voters for more money in some form, I would hope that the property tax dollars going to public safety are done in such a way that they can't be touched by future commissioners down the road who haven't gone through this process and don't understand why the mills are at that level.
And if I can address that, if you don't mind, Mike, the law does not, if the citizens voted for 10 more mills for public safety tomorrow, 10 years from now, the law does not allow this commission or a future commission to take those mills for anything but what the citizens voted that they are for.
But
A great example, and I think this is where you might be going, Dave, is the weed district. Years ago, the weed coordinator asked the citizens for 5 mills for weeds. The citizens said yes. That fund was getting this was during your years, Steve, that fund was getting 1.6 mills as its base funding. The citizens voted 5 more mills. The commission did not take that 1.6 away because there were now 5. They took the 1.6 plus the 5. Weeds are funded by 6.6 mills today. So law enforcement last year, we, in the resolution for the budget, guaranteed, I think, 34 mills, 35 mills. If the citizens said, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, if the citizens said, we wanna vote 10 more mills for public safety, what you would do is 34, 35 plus 10 equals 44, 45. But the law would not allow us to take those mills away from what the citizens vote them for. Does that help?
Partially,
All right.
because I've seen it as a backdoor run around. For the voted, the amount of the voted mills can't be changed, that's true. But the mills that were there before the voted, the 35, could be adjusted because it's still within the cap, your floating mills. And you adjust the number of mills for each of the tasks in that bill. I would not want to see a future commission down the road that can go back and say, well, they've got 10, we can't touch that, but we could take 5 of what was there before. That's the door.
Dave, there's all kinds of fears out there.
Yeah,
I
but that's
will
the
tell you,
door
this
that needs-
commission wouldn't do that, but you can't control the future. I would hope a future
But
commission
if
would.
you
So-
want people to vote for that, you need to put as much in place as you can to guarantee that that won't happen. In other words, that you could end up in court arguments.
I think what you do is matters. I mean, the commission has, with this challenge, the opportunity to evaluate how they want to do things going forward. The one thing about, the mills were 34.16 last year. In the past, they've been as high as 45. But the revenues have been increasing, which is a good thing. So even if the mills have not been raised back to 45, the total dollars coming from property tax have gone up, which is a good thing. Every year is different, every budget is different. What you're looking at now is trying to create stability across all county operations, so we don't have to have meetings like this. And, you want to work toward the exceptions. Work toward the exceptions. Don't make exceptions the rule. And that's kind of where you're at.
Jody?
Jim?
I just wanted clarification on a couple of things. One of the things you said was the decisions were appropriate to kind of take the blame away and to move forward. But you only looked at the public safety side of the budget, correct? Is that correct?
That's
And
correct.
what went into the public safety
That's
side of the budget? Okay. One of the other questions.
So if you look at, and that's in context to this revenue stream for the detention facility, what a great idea. As long as these prisoners come in, we're making money, and we're providing access. Otherwise, anybody would say that's a good deal. That was an appropriate decision, but what every board has to look at is how do conditions change? They're both internal conditions and external conditions. And I mentioned, attitude of taxpayers, the ability to pay, what's the state of the economy, what are the other competing needs for money? All of those change, so how does that decision we made 10 years ago stand today against that environmental change?
Sure, I understand that. So as far as the decisions, you didn't look at any of the decisions that were made by the commissioners with regard to the money that they sent to public safety or the money that they sent elsewhere?
I did not look at the rest of the budget, and I'm eager to do that. I think there's probably some lessons to be learned there.
Is that in the plans for him to look at the rest of the budget? Is that one of the things that we're going towards?
I hope so.
I think that was the general consensus, that we were gonna try to go through the entire county budget with him to see where we can move things around.
Okay, thank you.
And a full analysis of understanding, not only for us, but for department heads and the public as well. To have somebody like Bill come in and explain it in the same language, but really gives a different understanding because it's a different perspective.
Craig?
Sorry, it sounds like the word that everybody's avoiding here is reduction, instead of how we can come up with alternative ways to fund everything, which is great, but not one mention of how we're gonna reduce this or reduce that. And you can't pretend like that wasn't the subject of all conversations for like the last couple of years, is reduction, reduction, reduction. And here we are at this point, and we didn't reduce, and here we are saying, oh, we don't have enough money to operate, but we didn't reduce, so of course we don't. So this is not unexpected for a lot of people, because we didn't reduce enough to come down to a level where we could come even.
Let me address that. The two things that you should know. One is that currently, the budget is okay right now, and it will be okay going through most of next year. So that's where you're at.
If we don't have PILT. I mean, if we have PILT, if we have PILT, but if
If you have
PILT disappeared right now, no payment of PILT, are we even? Not even
No,
close.
I'll agree.
Not even
So
close.
when you're constructing the budget this year, constructing this year's budget, I think you're in that stage right now. They're starting to construct the budget for 1920. They have to look at all the revenues and determine what's going on with those. Just like I said, there's a risk assessment on the revenue side and a risk assessment on the expenditure side. And there's gotta be a mitigation strategy in both cases, in all cases. This budget you're in now, you're okay. You're not expanding, you're not really cutting anything yet. The next one you might have to, the one after that, is possible. And I'm not taking that off the table, and I wouldn't suggest that they take it off the table either, because when you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And if you have to cut, you wanna cut strategically and still be able to provide the services you wanna provide in the county as much as possible, as much as possible. So, if you pay attention and participate, I think that you're gonna find that, the current state of affairs is probably gonna change.
Well, I think so also, one of the suggestions that you did make, Bill, in reduction was, do we keep our detention facility open or not?
So that's a key decision.
Right, so that is something that we will consider, but we also know it has ramifications with other things,
That's correct.
so it's not just that simple.
No, and that's why I'm saying that the investment of time in the study to look at the comprehensive budget and to put everything in context is probably a wise decision. It's better to know where you're at than not to know where you're at, and just think you're looking at one thing as a problem, it may be the whole thing, I don't know.
And a third option there is, and when this go to you, is the option of using it as a county jail, not taking in paid customers from out of Broadwater County, but also not having to pay $128 a day in Gallatin County for our folks. So that's option number 3.
And this gentleman raised a point about, whatever other resources can be brought. I've spent my whole career trying to figure out what is the best way to pay for things. And obviously, the best way to pay for things is to have somebody else pay for it. But, and when it comes to taxation, I mean, and you heard the line, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. That's, what we're looking at is, first of all, if you're gonna do taxation at all, you want it to be equitable. So you wanna make sure everybody's paying a fair share. If you can get somebody else to provide money, that's great too. So you're looking at every possible stone you can overturn. It is a problem when legislators, as they do, legislatures, put constraints on local government. I hate it because you're closest to people who want the services. You should be able to make decisions. At the same time, we have to look at whatever authorities we have to get this all done. So, it isn't just, what other taxing districts can you give responsibility to or get money from? Can you create a law enforcement district that would take these costs and segregate them from the rest of the county budget so that that taxing district absorbs all of these costs? Those are things we have to look at going forward, and you have time. You have time to do that. You just have to look at all those opportunities. And even try some things even if they haven't been done by anybody else before. Use your imagination. So. Of course, it sounds great, doesn't it?
This process is gonna force us all to think outside the box and look at the way we've been doing things differently from this point forward. Prioritization of services, things like that. it's a big deal. It's not gonna be an easy task. It's gonna be fully involved, so.
Yes.
So, I'm here from the Three Forks Rural Fire District. I just wanna quick mention that when you mentioned public safety, we're in about the same position as the sheriff's department, probably worse. You know, our district covers the south end, so it's gonna be something that was definitely gonna have to be looked at. And, please keep us in the loop, is what we're doing there, so.
I don't
Think
think
you guys
everybody
can walk
knows
with
that
us.
from mile marker 100 south is covered by the Three Forks ambulance
101,
and fire.
101.
Oh, 101, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Right, and we receive about, what was it last year, $11,000?
$10,000.
$10,000 for that, so,
And we've got the impact of the 3,000 people down
yeah, so. More good news.
there. And a 200 square mile fire district,
yeah.
all the way from Black Ford's crossing to milepost 101.
And also would like to know, the Three Forks, the city of contracts with Gallatin County for their police protection. And we pay about $330,000 a year for that. Mutual aid, we certainly understand that, and we're glad that we can come across the line and help. At the same time, we've also had that consideration given to us where Broadwater has come over and gave us aid when we need help too. And so we'd like to make sure we keep those lines open. But we're, as a fire department, are concerned, you know, there's talk of building a fire hall over there. And I think we're getting into new territory where you may be asking the people in the southern part of the Three Forks district to be paying for a new fire hall that's gonna be 35 miles away from them if you wanna go clear down to the Madison. So we're gonna have some interesting things that we're gonna be looking at. And so we just want you to know, we know, and we'd like you say, we'd like to be kept in the loop and stuff.
Thank you.
And if I may, we've had some conversations. We've been meeting down in Three Forks about every 2 weeks, and one of the things that we have talked about is trying to figure out, and I think Darrell brought it up, try to build an emergency services center in the southern end of the county. So fire station, ambulance, and law enforcement center to where we can put somebody. I will say, I just got the interlocal agreement from the city of Three Forks to allocate some space to us within the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office that they lease from the city. So we'll get to review that and get that on the plate. I will say it's very nice, the city of Three Forks, who owns the building, said we will give you some space to work and we won't charge you for it. So that's a great thing, and the next deputy that we're in the process of trying to hire is gonna be stationed in the Three Forks Junction area. That will be their home, that's where they're gonna work, and hopefully that mutual aid will work back and forth fairly well. So there's some good news there in that aspect. But we understand exactly, I've been down to Three Forks quite a few times. They've been nice to me. Brandon got an earful, I got down there and they were very nice and respectful and didn't yell at me too bad. So we do understand, we recognize there's a problem, we're working towards that as well. That's part of my administration, what we're trying to work as, how do we get a better understanding of what's going on in Three Forks Junction, how we provide better services down there. So if you can't tell, I like to have community involvement in those decision-making processes, so that's where we're at.
Any other comment or questions?
I have a comment. I just want to thank all of you for the opportunity to work with you, and also want to thank the sheriff and the sheriff and everybody on the staff and the sheriff's department for their assistance they gave me in being able to look at this, and for Dave as well, for some of the work he's done in the past. It's been really helpful. So thank you very much, and thank you all for listening in. And big things are going to happen.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, welcome.
And my comment too is that I'm encouraged by how many people were here. And grateful that you're willing to take the time to educate yourself and be part of our process. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have extra copies. I'll send you electronic.
Perfect. If anybody doesn't get a copy, if you send us an email, we'll get you the electronic copy so that everybody and anyone else who's interested is sure to get a copy.
Okay, you have other business, I'm sure? Oh, that's it?
You were it.
Yeah.
Thank you.